It was a cold and busy morning at the airport. People were rushing in every direction, dragging their suitcases, calling on phones, or waiting in long lines. Among all that noise sat two little girls on a bench near Gate 22. Their faces were pale, and their clothes looked old. The older one, about 12, hugged her younger sister tightly. The younger girl had her head on her lap, eyes red from crying. They had been sitting there for hours, too scared to move, too tired to talk. The older girl's name was Lila, and her little sister was June. They had arrived at the airport with their mother early that morning, but something terrible had happened. Their mother, who had been feeling sick for days, suddenly collapsed before they could board their flight. The ambulance had come and the girls were told to wait. A few hours later, an officer came to them and said softly that their mother didn't make it. Lila remembered the words but didn't fully understand them. All she knew was that their mother was gone and they had nowhere to go. They had no father, no close relatives. Their mother had been a hard-working woman who cleaned offices at night and took care of them during the day. Lila remembered her saying, "No matter what, we'll stay together." But now, Lila didn't know how to keep that promise. She tried to act brave for her sister, though her hands trembled. Every time someone walked by, June asked in a small voice, "Is Mom coming back?" And Lila could only hold her tighter. Across the waiting area sat a tall man in a gray suit reading a newspaper. His name was Mr. Leonard Hayes, a billionaire businessman. He owned hotels, factories, and even a charity foundation. But most people only saw him as a busy man who never smiled. He had just finished a big meeting in another city and was waiting for his private flight. But that morning, something unusual caught his attention. He saw the two girls sitting alone with an old suitcase and no adults around Dot at first. He tried to look away, telling himself it wasn't his business. But something about their small, sad faces stayed in his mind. After a few minutes, he saw an airport guard walk over to them. The guard asked them questions, and Lila tried to explain what had happened. Leonard couldn't hear everything, but one sentence reached his ears clearly. "Our mom died this morning. We don't know where to go." Those words hit him like a shock. He slowly put down his newspaper. The guard looked helpless and left after a few moments, probably unsure what to do. The older girl wiped her sister's tears and whispered, "It's okay. I'll take care of you." Leonard felt something deep inside him. He had lost his mother when he was a child too. The memory of standing alone in a hospital hallway came back so clearly that his throat felt tight. He stood up and walked toward them. Lila saw him and immediately grew tense. She had been told never to talk to strangers. But Leonard didn't look scary. He stopped a few steps away and said softly, "Hi there. Are you two all right?" Lila nodded quickly, trying to stay polite, but her eyes filled with fear. He smiled gently. "My name's Leonard. You look tired. Do you need any help?" Lila hesitated. "We were supposed to go home with our mom," she said, her voice shaking. "But she got sick last night, and they said she's gone." She lowered her eyes, and her small hand tightened around her sister's. Leonard knelt beside them so he wouldn't look so tall. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "That's a lot to handle. Where were you flying to?" Lila sniffled and said, "Home. But we don't have anyone there anymore. The airline said we can't fly alone." Her little sister looked up and whispered, "Are they going to take us away?" Lila hugged her and shook her head. Leonard felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't used to emotions catching him off guard, but something about these girls reminded him of the boy he once was lost, scared, and pretending to be brave. He took out his phone and called an airport official he knew. Soon, a staff member came with blankets and hot drinks. Leonard bought them some food and water. The girls didn't eat much, but June smiled a little when he handed her a small chocolate bar Dot while they sat there. Leonard made a few more calls to find out what could be done. The airport staff told him that social services had been contacted and someone would arrive soon. Lila listened quietly, her eyes darting between the adults. She didn't understand most of what they said, but she could tell something serious was happening. When the social worker arrived, she knelt down to talk to the girls kindly. "We're going to take you somewhere safe for now," she said. "You'll have a warm bed, and we'll help find you a family." June looked terrified. "I don't want to go," she said, clutching her sister's hand. "Please don't make us." Leonard saw the panic in their eyes. He tried to calm them. "It's okay," he said softly. "They just want to make sure you're safe." Lila turned to him with tears forming. "Can you come with us?" she whispered. The question broke his heart. "I can't right now," he said gently, "but I'll make sure they take good care of you." The girls were taken to a small government car. As it drove away, Lila looked out the window and waved faintly. Leonard stood there watching until the car disappeared. He didn't move for a long time. His assistant came up and reminded him that his private jet was waiting, but he didn't answer right away. When he finally got on board, he sat by the window, lost in thought. As the plane lifted into the clouds, he looked down at the city below. The lights blurred through the glass, and he felt something strange, a feeling he hadn't known in years. His heart felt heavy but alive. He couldn't stop seeing Lila's eyes, full of fear and courage, or hearing her small voice saying, "Please, don't let them take us somewhere scary." He tried to focus on work, opening his laptop and reading reports. But every number, every chart looked meaningless. The faces of those two girls wouldn't leave his mind. He remembered how cold their hands had been when he gave them the drinks. How Lila tried to comfort her sister instead of crying for herself. That night, in his hotel room, he couldn't sleep. The thought of those two little girls in some strange shelter made his chest ache. He got up, walked to the window, and looked out over the city lights. He had built towers, companies, and foundations, but none of it gave him peace. He whispered to himself, "Maybe I was supposed to meet them today." The next morning, as the sun rose, he made a decision he hadn't planned or thought through. He called his driver and said, "Take me to the children's center near the airport." He didn't know what he was going to do exactly. He just knew he couldn't forget the look on that girl's face or the words she had said. Somewhere deep inside, he felt it. The moment he met them, his life had quietly changed. When the jet touched down in Los Angeles, everyone began to gather their things, but Richard stayed still in his seat. His mind was full. He had seen something on that flight he could not stop thinking about. His son, who had screamed and cried for years during every takeoff, had smiled because of one woman's kindness. That moment replayed in his mind over and over. Clara touched his shoulder gently. "Let's go," she whispered. But he turned and looked toward Monica, who was standing by the cabin door, thanking passengers as they left. Her smile was calm, her eyes kind, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. When their turn came to leave, Richard stopped beside her. His voice was quieter than usual. "Miss Hayes, you changed my son's day and mine, too." Monica smiled politely. "He did all the hard work," she said. "He just needed someone to help him feel safe." Richard wanted to say more, but couldn't find the right words. Ethan suddenly tugged his sleeve and said, "Bye, Miss Monica. Thank you for fixing Silver Falcon." She crouched down, smiled, and held out her hand. "You're very welcome, Captain," she said softly. "Keep flying brave." Ethan hugged his small toy airplane tightly and waved as they left the cabin. That night, at home, Ethan couldn't stop talking. For the first time, he described his flight with excitement. "She sang to me, Mom. She fixed my plane. And she wasn't scared of me." Clara listened with tears in her eyes. Richard sat in silence, his throat tight. He had never heard his son speak so warmly about anyone outside the family. When Ethan finished, he carefully placed his toy airplane on his bedside table and whispered, "Good night, Miss Monica." Clara smiled sadly. She really touched him. For the next few days, Richard couldn't focus on his meetings. Every time he opened his laptop, the image of Monica kneeling beside his son filled his thoughts. He asked his assistant to find out what airline she worked for and if she could be contacted. The assistant looked surprised but did as told. A few days later, she came back with her information. Monica lived in a small apartment near the airport, still working long hours. Richard decided to meet her. He arranged for a lunch meeting and asked if she'd be willing to join. Monica was hesitant at first. "Sir, I'm just a flight attendant. I didn't do anything special," but Richard insisted kindly. "Please. It would mean a lot to me and my family." When Monica arrived at the quiet restaurant, she felt nervous. She wore a simple blue dress and carried her usual calm smile. Richard and Clara were already waiting. He stood up as soon as he saw her. "Miss Hayes, thank you for coming." She nodded politely. "You can call me Monica." Clara smiled warmly. "You gave our son peace. That's not something money can buy." Over lunch, Richard asked how she had known how to calm Ethan. Monica looked down for a moment, her voice soft. "I had a younger brother, Devin. He had autism too. He was gentle and smart, but the world wasn't kind to him. I learned that loud voices and harsh reactions never help. What he needed was patience, a soft tone, and someone to listen." Her eyes grew misty. "He passed away when he was 10. Since then, I try to help kids like him whenever I can." Clara reached out and touched her hand. "That explains everything. You understood Ethan in a way no one else could." Richard listened quietly, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I've spent years trying to fix things with money," he said slowly. "Therapists, private schools, doctors. But you helped him with kindness. That's something I can't buy." Monica shook her head gently. "Kindness isn't expensive. It just takes time and care. Your son just needed someone who didn't see him as a problem." After that lunch, Richard couldn't stop thinking about what she said. He called his corporate team the next day and announced something new, a foundation called Wings of Calm. It would train airline staff to support children with autism and other special needs during travel. It started with one flight, he told them, and one person who made a difference. When the news reached Monica, she was overwhelmed. She didn't expect her simple act of care to inspire something so large. Richard called her again and asked if she would help lead the first training sessions. "You understand this better than anyone," he said. Monica agreed, touched beyond words. A few weeks later, during one of her flights, Monica noticed passengers whispering excitedly. A story had started spreading online. A woman had posted a picture of her kneeling beside Ethan mid-flight with the caption, "This flight attendant didn't just calm a child. She reminded us what humanity looks like." The post had gone viral. People from around the world shared it with messages of love and gratitude. Many parents with children like Ethan wrote comments saying they cried reading it. Monica was surprised when she saw the article appear on news sites the next day. "Billionaire's son calmed by kind flight attendant," read one headline. Reporters tried to find her, but she quietly stayed at work, avoiding attention. For her, it had never been about fame. A month later, Richard invited Monica and her family to visit Ethan's school. She almost said no, afraid of the attention, but then she received a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a drawing, a simple picture of a plane flying through clouds with two figures waving. Underneath it were the words, "Thank you, Miss Monica, from Captain Silver Falcon." That made her smile. When she arrived at the school, Ethan spotted her instantly and ran across the playground with his arms open. "Miss Monica!" he shouted with joy. He hugged her tightly, his face pressed against her uniform. Tears filled her eyes. "You came," he said, smiling. "I told everyone you're my friend." She knelt and said softly, "Of course I came. Friends keep their promises." Richard stood nearby, watching quietly. His eyes filled with emotion as he saw the woman who had once knelt beside his son now being hugged like family. "You gave me my boy back," he said to her later. "You reminded me what matters most." From that day forward, Monica began helping Richard's new foundation. Together, they trained dozens of flight attendants, teaching them how to stay calm, speak gently, and comfort children with special needs. She spoke to new trainees with warmth, saying, "Sometimes a small act of care can change an entire journey." Every time she said those words, she remembered Ethan's smile. The foundation grew fast. Airlines across the country began to adopt its methods. Parents sent thank-you letters, telling how their children now traveled peacefully because of attendants trained through wings of calm. And every time Richard saw one of those letters, he thought about that single flight and that single song that had started it all. One evening, after a training session, Monica opened her bag and saw Ethan's drawing folded neatly inside. She always carried it with her on flights. It was her reminder that compassion could travel farther than any airplane. She smiled, touched the paper gently, and whispered, "Keep flying brave, Captain Silver Falcon." At the Langston home, Ethan's room had changed too. On his wall, beside his favorite posters, hung a framed photo of a smiling flight attendant and a little boy holding a toy plane. Below it, Richard had engraved a line that read, "True heroes bring calm where there is fear." Richard often looked at that frame before leaving for work. It reminded him that success wasn't about how much he owned, but about how much peace he could bring to others. He had learned this lesson not from a boardroom, but from a gentle woman with a kind heart and a song that calmed the sky. And somewhere high above the clouds, whenever Monica worked a flight, children smiled a little easier, and parents breathed a little lighter, because one woman had shown that a heart full of kindness could be stronger than the loudest storm.